It's going live now. Hello, beauty friends.
That's my thing. Hi, beauty friends.
We have the beadiest of all the friends here, and it's Meredith Roddy. And yes, Beauty Friends is Meredith's thing, and I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for being here, Meredith.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. If I could hang out with you every day, I would.
Yay. Well, before we were in quarantine and hanging out in person was a thing, I used to go and visit Meredith Roddy at the Beadalon studio probably like once a month or every other month, and I miss that.
I know, I really do too. It's a bummer, and now you're far away.
So far away. I know. It was so refreshing coming back to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Like, there is nothing like home. I'll tell you that. You can travel the world and have those like experiences out the wazoo, but there is nothing like being just close to your people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to check in and kind of have that touchstone of being near home, being near family, being near friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Meanwhile, Finn totally knows I'm on Facebook Live right now. Do you want to come say hi?
Do you know what? So we created this graphic for the Celebrity Spotlight. This week is Meredith Roddy, and she's teaching us DIY wire clasps. So guys, really excited about that one. But anyway, we're come up with these graphics that has Meredith's picture on them. So you know what's upcoming. But I think, Meredith, we should have your picture and Finn right next to it because he is always here.
I 100% agree. And he's smart too, because he knows, here, his little nose is right here. He knows when it's his turn to come on, and he knows when I'm in the project, he goes right underneath, and he knows when I'm wrapping up to come and wave his tail to say goodbye. It's really funny.
He's so sweet.
Oh, gosh. Oh my goodness. Oh, look at all the fun friends. Yay. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Let's take a minute to say hello. Danielle is on the comments. She says that Finn is camera ready.
No. I need to meet this Danielle. She is so uber talented, and I feel like I know her already. And she's just right up the turnpike, I would imagine, for me, right? So we'll have to make that happen. Maybe next time you're in town, we'll figure out a way to have a safely social distanced meeting.
I would love that. Yes, absolutely. Let's see here. Shelly Penny says, hi, Sarah. Meredith. Tanya says, hello. Hey, Tanya. Hi, Trisha. Hey, Anita. Anita says her sound came back. Great. Good. You won't want to miss this one.
I know we were having some weird sound issues too. That's why we're on 3 cameras.
Yeah, maybe there's something in the air. It's with the Zoom, we're dealing with technology, and sometimes there's little buggers that'll get into your mic terminal, etc. Yeah. So thanks for bearing with us, everybody. I'm glad seem to be on smooth sailing now. So I just want to introduce Meredith for a moment. Meredith is the product specialist, marketing coordinator, yes, at Beadalon.
I have kind of a weird random title, but it's product marketing specialist. But basically what I do is I help take Beadalon products and get them into beaders' hands.
Awesome.
In creative ways.
Well, we are super grateful for that. And I have to say at Jesse James Beads, we're really excited about that one. We just got a huge box of Beadalon in and we restocked
the Beadalon always makes me happy.
And we put new stuff on and it's great. Like I love being able to learn about, like share these new tools and different Beadalon supplies with our fan base out here, because Jesse James Beads and Beadalon, we've always said we have a really happy relationship with each other, because Jesse James Beads makes the cool beads and Beadalon makes the very, very necessity items to make the beads come to life.
And we couldn't do it without you, because we don't do beads. It's just we've tried a couple of times, just between you and I, and everybody who's watching, to do beads. It's not our thing. We don't do it well. We don't know beads. We know wire. We know findings. We know tools. So we stick to that. And every once in a while we throw a special something in there. But we're so glad to have you guys, especially right up the road, being able to do all kinds of complimentary things. That's not me, right?
Mom was calling.
So yeah, so it's a great partnership, and we're so happy to have you.
And Meredith, as I'm speaking collectively for myself and everyone that's watching here, we are just really happy to have you, because you get the pleasure and the profession to be able to work with the Beadalon tools and everything all the time. But I see your brain ticking on jewelry ideas and projects all the time. Like for example, guys, in Destination North Pole, Meredith taught us how to make the seed bead netted ornament. Well, I remember being at Beadalon last year and Meredith was so excited because she was going to a local bead shop and she was going to learn how to make this netted ornament. Like you get an idea, you want to make it, and then you make it happen for all of us.
Well, and luckily for everybody, I spent, so in between Christmas and New Year's, I was on vacation. I saved up some days so I wouldn't have to be kind of on. And I totally just got myself inspired. I went back through a bunch of old magazines. I looked at a whole bunch of old things that I had made. And some of which I was like, I made that. A lot of wire working, a lot of really intricate stuff. But one of the things that I love doing, and I think that netted ornament is a really good example, is taking something that could be complicated, right? Like you can get like next level, like you wouldn't believe with those netted ornaments, but breaking it down to its absolute simplest steps, so that at least you can learn the basics. At least somebody can make a netted ornament. And if they want to start incorporating different stitches, if they want to start incorporating smaller beads, like you can then have the basic skills to start really ramping it up. So for some of this fancy wire work, some of this fancy cab setting that we see out there, and we're kind of like, oh my gosh, I would love to be able to make that someday. I have in my project queue, breaking some of that down and then building it back up. So I've got a good feeling, at least project wise, for 2021 that we're going to make some really, really fun stuff together.
I love that so much. And it's just, because you really hit the nail on the head. Like we see these amazing projects. I just received a beadwork magazine this morning and you look at these projects and it's like, wow, like that's so intricate. Like even just seeing like the diagrams with the string and the beads, like, I don't know if I can do that. But Meredith, you have such a way of breaking it down and doing its simplest format first. And the way that you educate all of us is really so, it's so empowering.
Oh, that's like the nicest compliment. And I have to give a shout out and a couple of moments of appreciation when the students and the beaders and the creators and the crafters who participated in both the Destination North Pole, but also in the camp over the summer.
Camp, my heart.
Why am I forgetting the name of camp? What was camp?
Camp. Jesse James Summer Camp.
Summer camp. Okay. Yeah. When people post things that they've made from something that I have showed or I have taught or I have inspired, it's like little smiles just erupt in my heart. And I often see those posts at 3:30 in the morning when I can't sleep, or if I'm having a really kind of a stressful moment, so I need to go outside and take a walk and I'm scrolling through Facebook, and every single person who I see those posts from lifts me up. And I'm just so grateful for all of that feedback back to me. So I know sometimes it can be really scary to post something that you've made. It can be very very raw sometimes to post something that you've made, but I appreciate every single one of them. So just from me to all of you, I'm just so grateful.
So Meredith, we gotta sit down. Guys, if you are not yet a part of the Jesse James Secret Stash group or what's the Beadalon group on Facebook, Meredith?
Jewelry Making with Beadalon, simple as that.
So Jewelry Making with Beadalon and Jesse James Secret Stash. If you guys are not yet part of those groups, please come join, request to join, and share something that you've made, because there's a human on the other end of that screen that you're posting with that is getting pure joy and enlightenment from seeing what you have made, whether it's a project that Meredith has taught, whether it's beads that Jesse James Beads has manufactured, or just something that you have created from your heart and soul. That is bringing joy to both of us and all of our community. So get yourself out there. Right.
And I've never seen anybody say anything mean about, I mean, there's no reason to be scared. You're your own worst critic. I know I'm my own worst critic.
Yeah, we really are. And I think that there's, you know, a lot of feel good, a lot of good that you can do for yourself by doing a little bit of that, showing a little bit of that vulnerability and putting yourself out there, taking a chance on something that you may desire, and just watching what happens in return.
Yeah. You put it out and then you get it back tenfold for sure.
So we've talked about seed beads. I know Meredith, we see Meredith do a lot of seed bead stuff. We had her doing a seed bead project, 2 seed bead projects for Jesse James Summer Camp. And then we had Meredith doing the netted ornament, which was amazing for Destination North Pole. But however, Meredith also loves wire, like she was just telling us a moment ago. And today we have a very special project that features a DIY wire clasp. We asked you guys what you wanted to learn, like some techniques that had been running around in your mind. What was something that you would like to see created and get a walkthrough step-by-step tutorial? One of the items that we heard a couple times was, how do I make my own clasps? So Meredith, how do we do that?
All right, so Sarah, do you want me to do the project first, or we really could just focus on making clasps today? It's kind of up to, we can kind of see where we go and see what happens.
I mean, Meredith created well, if you're going to make a clasp, you probably want a bracelet to attach it.
Okay. You make a very good point.
Stick around. We're going to get to the clasp at the end. Does that make sense? And we'll start with this wire tying station project, right?
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, let's do that. So this was inspired actually by Neely Patel's Silver Silk project during the Destination North Pole. And it honestly, I don't feel like it could look any different from that project. But what he did is he took 5 strands. I think he had 2 strands of silver silk and 3 strands of beads, and he braided them. And what he did is he did a traditional braid. So he had 2 strands, and then 1 strand. And the entire time I was watching him, all I wanted him to do was to do a 5-strand braid, or I like to call it a challah braid. And so, exactly. And so the idea has been kind of percolating and fermenting in my head for a while. And so I finally got a chance to kind of play around with it yesterday, and I think the day before. Got a lot of projects, a lot of things, a lot of irons in the fire these days. And my first attempt, I think I might have cut it apart because it just didn't work. And I know that often happens when we're designing. I had an idea in my head, and the way that I pictured it, it worked. But when I came to the actual execution of it, did not work. So back to the drawing board. But I think attempt number 2, I actually really like how it worked out. So this is what we're going to do today. I'm going to finish it off a little bit differently. I was just kind of playing around at the end because I wanted to see with that multicolor wire how that 5-strand braid worked. So it's almost kind of 2 techniques or 2 bracelets in one. You can actually do a whole bracelet just with this 5 braid technique. And you might think, do you need a Kumu Himo disc for this? You do not need a Kumu Himo disc for this. And then I just did a very simple loop of all of the wires together. And I love doing this with the multicolor wire. I might not necessarily do this with regular bead or artistic wire or German style wire, because it will kind of look like a big old pile of wire. But with the different colors, that's really what we're focusing on and highlighting in the multicolor wire. And just in case anybody's been under a rock for the past year and doesn't know what the multicolor wire is, this is what it looks like. It's artistic wire. So it's dead soft copper wire that is colored and has a tarnish resistant coating on top of it. But it's this variegated wire. So this is one strand of wire with all of these different colors running through it. So these are just a couple of the different ones that
we've been having a love affair with this wire all year long. I remember when you guys came out with this one last year, and it was like, well, that is cool. And then we just started seeing so many people, like these amazing wire artists, and then just like creating these beautiful creations. And it's so cool, like you said, how you swirl the wire around and you can really get the full depth of all the spectrum of color that's in this one singular wire.
And I love how when Sarah and I were first talking about the bead mix to use for this, we were thinking, well, you know, what colors should we use to complement? And you guys did an amazing job putting together mixes to complement these, the colors in all 6 of the color combinations. But I think it was Sarah who was like, well, why don't we just do clear Czech glass? And I was like, that is an amazing idea, because it will really highlight the colors on that wire. And now what I want to do is actually go back, and I pulled out a couple of other examples of designs. This was the Mary Soul bracelet that we had showed. But can you imagine this with the clear Czech glass?
Wow.
How cool will that look, right?
It's beautiful with those rondelles. Man, that is so Tucson. Marisol Hafner made that one.
I made it, but it's her pattern. And we're actually, just as a little plug for everybody to know, Marisol is going to be on the Beadalon Facebook Live on the first Thursday in February, whatever that date is.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm super, super excited to welcome her back.
Yeah.
And then, like I do with most of these designs, I made my own clasp. So once we get to it, we're going to learn how to make just a really simple fold over hook clasp. And then this is actually my favorite clasp. This was done with a findings form, but we're going to make it just free form this morning. Super, super easy. And I love the way it looks. That's really all there is to it.
Nice.
All right. I think that's enough preview. Oh, and then we're also, nope, that's the same one. Never mind. Okay. So let's get started. So I use the 8mm Czech glass on this. And one of the things that I love about this project is it's technique based. So if you want to use super teeny tiny beads, knock yourself out. If you want to use much bigger beads, that would work too. If you want to do it with different sizes, I think you could do that in there. You might just it might get a little fiddly. But yeah, now I want to try it with different sizes, but focus, Meredith, focus. So when I worked this up, I think I used 22 gauge wire just because I like, when I'm first working up a design, I like to do softer wire. It's easier on your hands. It's easier to, quite frankly, it's easier to demonstrate when you're using softer wire. If I were making this to sell or to gift or to wear, I would actually probably do it in 18 gauge wire. But for the sake of demonstration today, I am going to use 20 gauge wire just because, like I said, it's easier to demo with and it's easier on my hands. So one of the things that always fascinates me is that people don't know about the dispenser packs from Beadalon / artistic wire. So you saw I just gently pried that part open with my flat nose pliers. If you guys watched Wyatt with Sarah last week, he did what we usually do in the office, which is just rip it apart and take it off. But if you open this little back flap, pull this guy out, And I'm trying to save my nails, which is why I'm doing a lot with tools rather than with my hands. I'm filming some videos later on today and tomorrow. So I want to make sure that my manicure lasts, which is part of the reason why I had to stop doing so much wire work. But that's a story for a different day. Okay, so then I just pulled the wire out here, and I'm going to poke it through that back little, I don't know, little hole. And this way, after I push it back in and then tuck that under, now I have a home for my wire. So it pulls out, it actually pulls out a little bit straighter, I think, since it's going through that hole. I always have a home for it now, and it won't kind of unravel and get all messed up in my box O wire. So just a little tip. Sometimes when you watch me do it over and over again, you're like, oh, Meredith again with the showing. But for people who are joining us for the first time, I know that a lot of people were like, wait a second, you can do that? So it's always good to show more than one. So I'm just snipping off the end here because sometimes you can straighten wire out, and sometimes you just snip it off. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out, I think I measured 20 inches, which is more. Okay, so sorry, let me bump this up. And I think I'm going to need to stand for this. So I'm just going to, although, okay, no, we're spotlight. I was like, is everyone just going to see my belly? I'm going to stand for this. Let me know if you take the front camera, Sarah. So I'm using the tying station for this project. And part of what well, there are a lot of things that I love about the tying station, but one is that we have this measuring device, this ruler here on the other side. So I never need an extra ruler. So I'm going to measure out 2 times. So that's going to be 20 inches. And sometimes this gets stuck here when I am taking out a larger amount. So let's just, it's going to work. Yeah, there we go.
Melanie Lemon Swope just referenced the back flap of the artistic wire pack that you just showed us, like the back of the Speedy pajamas.
Oh my gosh, that's hysterical and also spot on. So in the interest of time and convenience, I'm actually just going to pull this guy out because I'm taking a lot of wire out and we want to do it fast.
Get that Speedy pajama flap right off, Meredith.
Yeah. It's an emergency. All right, so I'm taking 20 inches and then 110. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be creating 5 pieces that are 10 inches each, but 2 of them are going to be folded over. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going to fold these ones in the middle. And they did not end up being even here at the bottom. Totally doesn't matter. One of the things that I sometimes forget about wire work is it's very forgiving and does not necessarily need to be so precise all the time. And actually now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these from the top. So if you want to do 5 times 10, totally fine. I don't know. Sometimes you just get into your head doing something in a certain way. And that's just how I do it. So if you want to do 5, 10 inches, totally fine. So now all I'm going to do here at the top is turn this messy wrapped loop. Now, those of you who know me sometimes know that that kind of goes against everything that I stand for as a beader. But in this project, I am going to allow it. And I am going to use these stepped bail making pliers. If you do not have the stepped bail making pliers, please do yourself a favor and grab a pair. This is such a go-to grab all the time tool for me. And we're going to be using this in almost, is it almost all or is it all? I'll say almost all just to give myself an out. All of the wire wrapping that we're doing today. So again, since we're kind of doing this messy, and I'm doing it so that both I can see and you can see. Let's actually do it so that I can see. I'm gonna come around here and just pull these around. And because we're working with a bunch of wires, I'm gonna be using my fingers. I'm gonna be using my tools. It's really, all I'm doing is creating a loop. And maybe I could have done these a little bit longer to make my life a little bit easier, but why would I want to make my life a little bit easier when I'm doing a Facebook Live demonstration, right? And I think also it's very helpful when designers kind of create challenges, right? Because we all have challenges while we're doing our designing. So I love watching how different people work through a challenge. And so hopefully you enjoy that as well. All right, so I'm just kind of pushing these down, and if I need to mess around with them again in a little bit, that's fine. And the reason why I made such a big hole here is one, for design purposes, but also because I am going to be clipping this on my tying station. So I'm not using the tying station I'm not gonna smush this down. Here, let me come down a little bit closer so we can see. I'm not going to do this hard or all the way. I'm really just using this as a way of holding this in place. So there's plenty of wiggle room in here to work with, okay? And then I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this up, and then I'm actually going to turn my tray this way. That's better. That makes more sense.
So Meredith, do you have the wire loop that you just made on the nail, on the post that's coming up from the tying station? Yes. Okay.
It's just looped over, and there's plenty of room in here. All this is doing is holding this in place.
Gotcha.
And a couple of alternatives if you don't have a tying station, or if you, if you don't have a tying station, you could use, gosh, really anything that you can secure this with. You could use maybe a binder clip. I don't know, what are some of the other things that people use to hold things in place? We can talk about that. I'm just gonna put 5 beads on each of these 5 wires. What was I gonna say? Tying station. Oh, and if I were doing this for myself and not for demonstration purposes, what I would do, and I'm just tying a little loop here at the end of each one, okay, to keep those beads from sliding off. Get a nicer angle and a nicer workspace here. So what I like to do is hold my tying station down with a tacky mat. I use that on the tying station pretty much whenever I use the tying station. I'm trying to think if there is a time that I don't use a tacky mat. I almost always do. And in this situation, and because you'll see as I start braiding, it's going to move around a little bit. A tacky mat is your best friend with the tying station.
Meredith, what's a tacky mat?
You don't know what a tacky mat is?
I can kind of put 1 and 2 together and figure out what.
I usually have one right here to my left. But where has it gotten to? A tacky mat is a mat. That's exactly what it is. It's a sticky mat that you put down on your workspace, and then you can stick something to it. So let me see if my tacky mat is in the tacky mat spot. It does not seem to be. I'll find one before we leave each other. It's got to be around here somewhere. I also spent a lot of the break reorganizing my studio. And while I'm able to find a lot more things a lot more easily, there are some things, like apparently my tacky mat, that I cannot find at all. Where in the world did that go? I'm usually pretty good at remembering this stuff.
I have been seeing a lot of photos of members of our community that have gotten a chance to organize their beading creative crafty stations over the holiday break. And that is an inspiration out there.
You know, as much as I organize my space, somehow an hour later, everything is a mess again. It's just how I work. And actually for the Facebook Live, for Beadalon Facebook Live this afternoon, we're going to be working on the workbench, which is the bench behind me. So usually I'm on my jewelry station slash desk where I do my work, where my computer is. But I'm doing some hammering and I can't do that on my glass desk. So I'm going to be going behind. And it is literally, it's a mess over there. So I might just, you know, you guys will know when if you join me for it, you'll know that I will have taken everything and just put it in the other room. Okay, so, excuse me, 5 braids, super, super easy. Just like doing a regular braid, except you have 2 more strands, right? So let's come down here and get rid of some of this distraction. And I'm keeping this coil out because we're going to do a fun little thing with that coil. I hope I remember. Help me remember, Sarah. Okay, so we've got 3 on one side and 2 on the other. And you can do this with 7. You can do this with 9. I think I have a project on, it might be on the Beadalon YouTube that has a 9 braid. And I'm going to take these bracelets off because I can already tell that they are going to hit the camera every time I do this. Okay, so starting with the 3 side on the top, I'm going to bring this over here. Now I've got 3 on this side, right? Looks familiar. We're just doing a regular braid. And once again, we don't need a fancy Kumihimo board for this or anything. We just are using, I'm gonna bop this up just a little bit. We're just using the wire and we're using the tying station to hold it down in place. So now I've done 1 pass with each of the wires to kind of get everything in there in that nice braid look. And I'm ready to move my first bead into place. And I always move the bead on the center wire into place. So I'm gonna move that up here and then bring this one over because that's the next one that needs to go. And then I'm going to move the bead because now this is the center. And I'm going to move this wire next. And then it just becomes a matter of repetition, excuse me, and remembering to put that next bead into place before you bring the next wire down. So you just keep on going. And there are a bunch of different ways that you could do this, not the least of which is well, there are a couple of different variations and those I'm going to do those on some upcoming Facebook Lives. What was that, Sarah?
I was saying that I never realized that a 5-strand braid was so simple.
Yeah. Yuppers. And I mean, much like all of this stuff, you can make it a lot more complicated or a lot easier, depending on your inclination.
Do you know what this takes me back to, Meredith? Is when we created friendship bracelets, or when we were talking about friendship bracelets for JJB summer camp. Meredith was an actual summer camp instructor back when she was back years ago, I'm sure now. And that was one of the things that she had mentioned, is that with friendship bracelets, you can start out really simple and then get so elaborate. And this is a very good example of that.
Yep, 100%. Now I'm at 6.5 inches. I had to do my reverse math because I started at the 10 versus starting at the 0. So I'm actually going to clip my ends off now and start at the end. I probably should have done my wires a little bit more carefully and maybe a little bit longer. So let's say 12 inches each rather than 10 inches each. But I have a small wrist, so this is okay for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and snip off these ends.
This is where that ruler on the side of the tying station really comes in handy, because you can mark out, you can really see how long your bracelet is shaping up to be.
And I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm almost positive that when we did the first iteration of the tying station, there was no ruler there. And it was actually our vendor who was like, I think it's probably a good idea to have a ruler there. Let's just see what happens. And it ends up being like the most valuable of all of the parts of the tying station. I really like this underneath part too, especially when I'm doing macrame, because I can get my fingers in there without too much trouble. So I did not leave myself enough here. So like I said, if and when you decide that this is something that you want to make, go with 12 or even 14 inches, which is ironic because usually I have way too much wire, but sometimes we don't have quite enough, and that's okay too. All right, so now what I'm gonna do, and again, because it's wire, it's not thread or Beadalon or any kind of fiber or wire. Because it's copper wire, I can do the end of the braid here, and it just stays. That's just one of those things that just makes me happy. All right, and so now I'm just gonna smush this all together. And I like to use a flat nose plier for wire work. Well, it depends. I mean, bent chain nose pliers or chain nose pliers, they have their place as well. But I always feel like the flat nose plier is the unsung hero of the pliers family. And I use these guys a lot, especially because see, I have all of these wires here and I want them all bent in the same place. So the flat nose pliers allows me to do that.
That's a really good tip, Meredith, because I feel like you're right. The flat nose pliers don't get used all that often, but how you just showed it right there makes a lot of sense why you would want to use that tool in this particular position.
Yep, 100%. So now I'm going to just make another messy wrap loop on this side, and I'm going to just bring in as many wires as I can. And if they all aren't going to work, that's totally fine. Like I said, if and when I do this again, I will use a little bit more wire here so we can have a little bit more for our wrap. But for the sake of demonstration today, I'm going to work with what I have, which is these two right here. And I'm just going to wrap them around. Again, I like doing different kinds of projects that allow me to do messier wire wraps sometimes. That won't always be the case for me this year. There will be some projects that I'm working on that need to be very, very specific and very clean. So I think it's actually a good thing that I'm starting out a little messier. And I find that the flat nose pliers are not the right tool to get in as close as I want. So I'm going to switch over to my chain nose pliers here and move these around. So now I have a flat bracelet, but of course my wrist is round. So how do I turn this into a round bracelet? First thing I'm going to do is just pretend like that wire is behaving right in there. So there are a couple of different tools that I use to make my flat bracelets round. The first, it's actually back here, is my trusty 3D bracelet jig. I find that this is a really good starting mandrel to get my bracelet into the shape that I want. And if I was in the studio, we have a couple of other bracelet jigs, but I also like using the sizing drums. But if you have a jar or a cup or a anything round, a mug, or your fingers. My fingers are always kind of the last thing that I use to make something into a round shape. Now, if I had used 16 or 14 gauge wire, which we don't have in the multicolor, perhaps yet, this could be a cuff, right? So fun and pretty, but it's not quite durable enough to be a cup cup, a cuff right now. So let's go ahead and make a clasp. So let me just get a little bit of room here on my workstation.
Meredith,
yes.
Wanda says, I can't believe how fast that worked up. And I have to say the exact same thing. It's like, this is a really cool, beautiful wire bracelet project that didn't take, you know, it just didn't take a lot to work up this really, really cool, interesting looking project.
Thank you. Well, and not only that, but it didn't take a lot of beads. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 beads. Yeah. And if you have a bigger wrist, maybe 17 beads or 18 beads. But yeah, super, super fast and not a lot of wire. So what did we use? If I suggest 12 inches, so 12 times 5 is 60. So 60 inches or so of wire, not such a big deal. All right, so I put, here we go. I'm going to demonstrate. I've got some 20 gauge Colorcraft wire, and this is the brass wire, so it's a little bit stiffer. Gotcha. When working with the multicolor wire that has, Finn, leave it. He has, but it's something that is not a, oh, I see what he has. He's got his little laser pointer thing. That's probably not a good idea for him to be chewing on. I like to use the non-tarnished brass wire or the tarnish resistant brass wire because it is more of a half hard wire, even though it's in the artistic wire line. The multicolor wire I find can be too soft for clasps. I've made clasps with it because it's pretty in clasps. Hold on, I pulled out an example and now I'm not seeing it. This one? No. Well, I'll find it. But just a kind of a pro tip, if you like your clasps to be a little less soft, even before you get to all of the work hardening and the hammering and all of that kind of discussion, starting with the brass wire that complements pretty well the artistic wire, multicolor wire. It's a little tip there. Okay, focus, Meredith, focus.
Could you use the German style wire if you didn't have the Colorcraft brass?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yep. Yep, yeah. I am definitely in use what I come across in my studio mode. And I think that it's helpful for other people too, since I feel like we're all kind of in use whatever you come across in your studio mode. All right, so I have a piece here. Let's see. It is about 5.5, 6 inches. And I'm gonna put it in, again, we were talking about using those stepped bail making pliers. I'm going to put it in between the two smallest mandrel parts here. Hold on, I gotta get that away from Finn. You are being a naughty noodle.
Cool about this stepped up bail making plier that is not always apparent when you're just first looking at it from far away, is that it's actually 6 different sizes on there. Am I right?
Yep, 6 different sizes. And I find that I use all 6 sizes depending on my mood and my design and what I am working on at that moment. So for this, we're using the smallest size. And our other best tool, which is our fingers. So, and I apologize to everyone who is writing in on the comments. If there are any questions that I'm not answering, this is going to be one of those we got to get to it at the end things. Some projects I do, I can read the comments as I go along. This is not one of them. Okay, so what I've done, is I've made a bend, right? Super, super easy, no worries. And this is again, where I like to use my, my flat nose pliers. And what the goal here is to gently and with small incremental movements, push those 2 wires together so that they are bent in half. This will always have a little bend in it. And decoratively, I really like that. But I'm just using my fingers here and pinching this as much as I can without over pinching it or smushing it or grasping it so hard that my my wires go out of space. And if they do, just cut another piece of wire. I know when I first started, one of the things that I did was hold on to all of my scraps of wire, or try to take something like this and reform it. Go easy on yourself. It's 5 inches of wire. It's a penny. Just scrap it and move on. You'll be much, much happier in the long run. That's my advice. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, and our goal here is to make a clasp that looks like, I love that I clear everything to the side and then I can't find what I need. We are making a clasp that looks like this, okay?
Cute.
Right? So super easy and fun. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is that little lip on the first part. And it's almost like the little bend back that you do when you're making an ear wire. But right there, I just took it and I bent it back on itself against that smallest part of the jaw. And now what I like to do is just move it right up. I'm not even moving my tool at all because I'm going to be using this barrel right here. So I was using this barrel before, and now I'm using this barrel right here. And I'm going to rotate my wrist away from myself once. And now I can't roll my wrist anymore. So I'm going to replace my tool and roll it again. So one of the things that I always caution against is don't over rotate your wrists. Metal wire working can have a tendency to be owie. And it's not good. We don't want to be owie. We want to make sure that our tools are working for us and our bodies aren't working against us. Oh, here it is, right here at easy peasy. So the easiest one to do is just to bend the bottom 2 wires back into a little loop. So that's the one that I'm going to show first. So I kind of eyeball this because I know how big the wire is going to end up being, but you want to probably go about 1/2 inch and then cut both of your wires. See, my wires are not even. This is where you want even wires. So I'm going to use my flush cutters and I'm going to use them with the side, the flat side against, or I should say facing my clasp and snip. Okay, so now we have our little fun little clasp friend here and these down here. And this length is going to determine how much space you have down here. And see how I did a little bit of a smaller one here too? You can really vary this for a design element. So I like sometimes when they're a little small, they're kind of cute and fun, right? Or you can do one that's a little bit bigger. Totally up to you. Okay, so now for this one, I like to use not the very smallest, but the second smallest jaw of the stepped bail making pliers. And we're just doing a simple loop. So this time I'm holding the wire in between those 2 jaws and I'm going to rotate my wrist back toward myself. So small incremental movements, and you want to try to get both of the wires together, but see how my wires aren't necessarily coming both together? That's okay, because since we're using the stepped bail making pliers, what we're going to do is we're going to finish the one on the one side, and then we can turn it around. This one can get a little bit funky if you're trying to do too many things at once. And still not 100%. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna come in here with my round nose pliers. Everybody, I often get asked why people need so many tools. This is why. Because there's always the right tool for the job. So if your clasp is perfect, then rock on. If you want to make a couple of adjustments, you can do that as well. You can take this to, I brought over, over to your bench block if you want, and give it a little tap tap with a nylon jaw pliers. Oops. But you want to be careful, since this is doubled, that you don't hit it so hard that you start knocking things out of place. And if you do knock things out of place, then you can just come back in here with your pliers and kind of put things back the way you are. That's what I love about wires. If you get it out of whack, you can generally get it back into whack, unless it's way out of whack. So that is one little clasp friend that you can use. And then the way that I'm not sure that this is necessarily the best or right way to do this. I'm going to use a jump ring. So let's see. Let me just grab my whole jump ring container of jump rings. I think I have one that's going to work. Yeah, we'll see. We shall see. Oops. And then this is the easiest way to attach this kind of clasp, is just to use an extra jump ring. And oops, get that nice and closed up. And then I always find, see how I did that face down? I find that when I am putting a bracelet on myself, that face down is kind of how it needs to be in order for it to work. If you do it face up, you can't really get it on yourself very well. I'm really excited about how that turned out. I like when something turns out better than I expected. And that actually did. What's that, Sarah? I'm sorry.
I said, don't we all?
Yeah.
That looks adorable, Meredith. It's awesome. That big loop. Can you flip your wrist back over? Look how awesome that big loop looks right there. That Meredith, it's messy, it's casual, it's chic, it's colorful and organic and fun. And the way that you did the clasp, it looks seamless. It's really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Initially, I had really wanted to be able to do the clasps with the multicolor wire. And I think that if you work hard into it, and if you used a couple of the 18 gauges together, I think that it would be just fine. But sometimes I like kind of having that contrast in the clasp. And let me show another one that I did actually, which is super fun.
Meredith, we have a good question here real quick.
Shoot.
Nikki, let's see. Yes, it was Nikki wants to know, what is the difference versus the nylon hammer? What does the nylon hammer do to the wire versus metal?
Okay, so that's a really, really good question. My chasing hammer is currently back behind my workbench because it fell down. And in order for me to get it, which I probably should do by this afternoon's Facebook Live, a lot needs to happen. But to answer your question, what the nylon is going to do is it's going to work harden the wire without flattening it. And what work hardening means is it's compressing the molecules of the metal to make them harder. It's work hardening because you're working it and it's hardening. When you use a chasing hammer or a metal hammer and tap down like this, it's actually going to flatten the metal. So here you're flattening the molecules, which is actually pretty cool. But when you're using a metal hammer of any kind, you're going to also be flattening the wire.
Could you use a metal hammer to give the clasp a different look?
100%. You can use a dapping hammer. You can do all kinds of fun, funky things to the wire that will make it different textures. You can flatten it. You can make it look kind of not so much antiqued, but distressed. That's the word that I'm looking for. Distressed. Oh, Finn found some bracelets. Why are you being such a pain in my touche today? Goofy dog. Yes.
I would love
train of thought.
I would love to explore more of that on this channel at some point. Like, what can we do with metal hammers on wire to add some of this distressing? Because we play with the nylon we play with the nylon hammer quite often to work harder and make the metal stronger. But I would love to see like when we're trying to just like mess the metal up a little bit by using a metal hammer.
100%. I really like you doing that with the aluminum wire because it's so soft.
Okay.
You can really get some amazing textures and really, really neat looks. So my promise to you, Sarah, is for our next Facebook Live together, I will go back behind my my workbench and I will get my chasing hammer. And by that, I mean going to the office and grabbing another one from my from the storage room.
Great. I wrote it down. We'll make it happen.
We're likely what's going to happen. Okay. So do you want to see another variation of a clasp real quick?
Yes, please. Is this where the coil is coming into play?
What's that?
Is this where that little coil you showed us at the beginning of the video?
100%. So I have my little coil here and I did that with the coiling gizmo or the professional deluxe coiling, some sort of a coiling tool. I'm not sure. I've just found it in my stash.
In your pantry of beading supplies?
My pantry of beading supplies, yes. And one of my go-to things, and I do it almost without even thinking, is every time I work with a piece of wire, I take my nylon jaw pliers and I straighten it. Even if it's straight, I don't know. I'm sure that other people who do a lot of wire work or a lot of jewelry work have little things that they do every single time without even maybe necessarily thinking about them. But this is one of the things I do. No matter what it is, I either use this or the artistic wire straightener tool, which I don't have at my hands because I usually use thinner wire. But whenever you see Wyatt doing any wire work, he uses the artistic wire one because that's meant for some stronger wire. So I have a much longer piece than needed because I learned my lesson from doing my braid that I want to have a longer piece of wire. And I'm going to turn that same loop again on the smallest of the jaws of those bail making pliers. So I'm going to come here and I'm just going to make a little loop there.
And that's with the tiniest of the bail making, right?
The tiniest of the bail making. And this is where the flat nose pliers come in again, because they can grab onto your wire and just make a wonderful crisp bend. So let me just make sure that I'm doing this the right way. So how can I show this best? There we go. So I'm going to use my thumb and the motion of the pliers to make a nice crisp 90-degree angle there. And now I've just made this part and I made it a little bit smaller. And so now I need to make that next bend. It's funny, usually when I'm demonstrating things, I make them much bigger, but today I'm kind of feeling in a small and delicate mood apparently. Okay, so now I have that bend over like that. And I'm gonna take, I don't know, maybe about an inch of this coil. And this is just a scrap piece of coil. I was probably just demonstrating how to use the coiling machine, but I love how this multicolor wire, this is one piece of wire. It never fails to amaze me how cool this stuff.
The color palette is so awesome. It looks like that like Baja California striped beachy colorway.
Yep, I love it. I love it. It makes me so happy. Mm-hmm. And these are my colors, brown and blue. Those are my wedding colors. And so I love any opportunity that I have to be able to feature them in anything. Okay, so now this is this big long part right here. So now I need to bend this back to make the, I guess the bottom part of my clasp. And then I'm going to come up here again And bend this up. And then I'm going to kind of eyeball where I need to make this loop, where I need to cut it. So again, flush cutters, I'm cutting my flush cut against or toward what I'm keeping. Does that look about right? No, that looks pretty good. Oh,
cool.
Loving this.
I am loving it too.
It's going to need a little tweaking once we get to the end of it, but
I love where it's going.
And so now, once again, I'm using the smallest, and I'm just kind of got a weird angle on this, but hopefully everybody can see what I'm doing, bending that back onto itself. And now I just need to do a couple little tweaks. There we go. Oh, fun. Sorry. Once again, I love when something like that I saw in my head ends up coming out even better than I had wanted it to.
That's awesome. And I love that we learned how to use the coiling gizmo last week with Wyatt. So now it's like building upon the skills learned last week, applying them to the new project that Meredith is teaching us this week. Look how awesome that is.
Right?
I love it.
So fun. And then all you need to do to make this kind of attached to a design is, I'm looking to see if I have something that has two circles. It's basically you just attach here. Let me take this one off.
Tina says, I love it when a plan comes together. Yes.
I know, right? All right, so we're gonna pretend this one isn't here and we have these two rings here.
Yes, show us.
So it goes, well, of course this is not a good example, but basically, here, I'll show it with us. The one that's already done. Like that. So it goes in, you've got the ring here, and then this part stays down. So this is the attached part. And then you have a larger ring that you make here, and that's the part that comes off.
Okay, so the part that stays closed, that stays attached to your bracelet, do you just open and close the clasp like a jump ring to attach it to your bracelet? Does that make sense?
No, what I would do here is I would wrap the loop so that it's smaller than this, so it won't come out.
Okay.
Or actually, no, I see what you're saying, and I can support that. Okay, so yes, you could do it both ways, but this is definitely easier. Sometimes I make some things easier on myself, and sometimes I make them more complicated on myself. Let's do easy this time. So yes, we come in here like that. Let me show that again, just really quickly. So I opened that, just like you said, Sarah, just like a jump ring.
Okay.
And I looped that on, just like that. And then I closed it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm glad you explained that, because I was thinking that you would open the entire clasp like a jump ring, but that might lose the integrity of the clasp shape. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily, but it could. But then this part stays open, and then then that part loops onto your ring. So you don't need to take this out of plane as long as you have one that's secured, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, it does.
But because this loop is really big, it's going to just come right off.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want is for that loop to be smaller so that it does not. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. Yay.
Excellent. That clasp was really, really cool. Meredith, can you hold up the clasps that we just made in this tutorial real quick?
I need to find the first one. So we made this one.
Yes.
And then where's the bracelet? Oh, it's on my wrist.
There it is. That's like when you're searching for your sunglasses and they're on your head.
100%. Oh my goodness. What am I going to do with myself? So those are the two that we made, right?
Yeah.
For fun.
That is great. Angela Miller says that is such an awesome and epic class. I could not agree more. Wow. Yay.
Yay, thank you. So I'm just looking at Cindy's question. So you're just making the loop on the bracelet large enough that it will slip over the loop on the end of the clasp. Right. Yes, that is correct.
So Meredith, could you in theory make a bunch of these clasps and have them in your stash ready to go and then build the bracelet around them?
Definitely. I personally would probably do it the opposite way, just because I'm going to want the clasp to match the bracelet, and it's
Okay.
There's a greater chance of me needing to do it that way rather than the other way. But to have a whole bunch of, you know, non-tarnish brass and silver clasps around that you could then, you know, add to whatever or embellish in whatever way you needed to, would also be a really good idea. And it's a great way to use up scraps, right? Because what was that? I think I did maybe 5.5 inches.
I think you said 5 inches, yeah.
If you're, you know, making a much bigger project and then you have a little scrap left over, that would be one reason to keep your scrap. So maybe I should take back what I said earlier about not keeping your scrap. Sometimes it's a good idea, sometimes not. For example, this little scrap was literally just thrown into my artistic wire, multicolor wire box, and I ended up making a really fun clasp with it today. And otherwise it might have ended up in the permanent scrap pile. So
Meredith, what is the gauge of the wire that you used on the coil?
The coil is 22 gauge.
Okay.
So in the multicolor wire, we have 18, 20, and 22. And so I like to choose which gauge I use dependent on what project I'm doing.
Absolutely.
So
Makes sense.
the 20 gauge wire is much thicker, and then the 18 gauge is thicker still. I think I'm using 18 gauge in the project that I'm doing for Beadalon at 2 o'clock.
Cool. Well, we will have to catch you on that one. I love watching you and the artists that are online teach us about the wire gauges, because it really is, it really makes a difference. Like this 2 teeny tiny gauges of wire makes such a difference in the project that you're making. I actually have a question about that. This is one that's come up in the Secret Stash group. I believe it was Miss Luna Jason that had asked this one, and I would like to know your expert opinion on this. So say we have lost the sticker that goes on our wire spool, or we have wire scraps like you're talking about. How do you know what wire gauge it is if you don't have it on the spool?
That's a challenge. I will answer the question for how I do it. Right. And then I will answer the question or I'll give a couple of tips. I can generally, since I've been doing this for so long, look at the wire and know the gauge, which is a little bit unacceptable, but also kind of impressive. I can do it with Beadalon bead stringing wire too, which is ridiculous. Because we're talking about, like, you know, hundreds of millimeters of difference in pieces, little tiny pieces of wire.
Name that gauge.
A couple of better and more realistic tips are to take a spool that you know. Okay, so maybe I don't know what this gauge is here, but I know that this is 18 gauge wire, right? Okay. So this is definitely not 18 gauge wire because it's much thinner than this. So then I can come down to my 20 gauge wire, all right? So it's still not the same because this is much thicker. So I know that this is smaller than 20 gauge wire. So I can kind of, by comparing it to something that I already know, I can gauge what gauge it is. See what I did there? I did it. I went there. The other thing you can do is there are actually tools out there that will tell you. So either a draw plate or not, it looks like a draw plate, but it's kind of a disc that has holes in it. So you just put the wire through and you figure out what, how big it is that way. You could use a bead slide gauge, I think is what they're called, or a ruler, because if you look on, there are definitely lots of resources out there, including on Beadalon's website, that tells you how big things are. So if you have a really sensitive ruler, you can generally figure out like, okay, this is 0.81 millimeters. So I know that it's this gauge. So a couple of different ways to figure it out. But what I like to do is put my wire back in baggies that have the gauge on them. So I don't always remember to do that, but if I, for example, with the German style wire, because once you take that out of the package, you don't know what gauge it is anymore. So I have a bag of 20 gauge wire. So I try to make sure that every time I'm working with 20 gauge wire, it goes back in the bag.
That is really smart. And that takes us back to organizing our spaces and just keeping things nice and tidy. And whether you want to keep your scraps of wire or not, if you decide to keep them. Sherry Ann here does the same thing as you, Meredith. She says that she has small jars with labels of the pieces that she puts in while she's working on her projects. Smart, guys. I like it. And I like the idea of just being able to eyeball your wire with what you already have on a spool if you know, have a couple pieces laying around that didn't get filed away into organization.
My biggest challenge is the difference if I have things that aren't labeled, whether it's German style wire or artistic wire, because the gauge is going to be the same, but the temper will be different. And
Sure.
So that's where I really try to keep them in separate boxes and separate bags. If I'm working with German style wire, I'm working with German style wire. If I'm working with artistic wire, I'm working with artistic wire.
Good to know. Well, this is really fun, Meredith. This is like, we've done the last couple of projects we've done together have been seed beads, and it was really, really such a treat to see you get your hands on this wire, particularly the multicolor wire, because I know how much you have a passion for it.
You're a popular lady
today. Always. And guys, I just want to say, everyone that's been watching, thank you so much for coming into the Jessie James Secret Stash group on Facebook and dropping in your comments of the tutorials and the techniques that you have been wanting to learn. This is your space. Like this 11 o'clock hour that we're doing the celebrity spotlight at Jessie James Beads. This is for you to learn some new techniques and get some fresh ideas. So thanks for putting those ideas out there. We wouldn't have thought to do DIY clasps on our own. So that's all thanks to you guys. So thank you, Jessie James community and Beadalon community. And thank you, Meredith, for coming on and teaching us this incredible, incredible project, bracelet and clasps today. Really good.
My pleasure. I love our community. It makes me so happy. And I love hanging out and making jewelry. And the best part is when when you say to me, well, this is what people want to learn, then it challenges me to go back and, make sure that I can teach it. So being able to do a clasp is one thing, but being able to show it to somebody else is a completely different animal. So it's nice to be able to have those little personal challenges as well. So it's all gratitude all around.
Yay, thank you. Well, I will let you go, Meredith. I know you said that you've got some more video recordings to happen today. Meredith is going to be live on the Beadalon page today at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So set your clocks and join her for that one. We will have this project posted onto YouTube and also the Jessie James blog. We'll be emailing that one out tomorrow morning. So if you missed it, check your email inbox tomorrow. You can catch the replay from the beginning. But for now, Meredith, thank you again so much. I can't thank you enough. It's always a treat getting to hang out with you, and thank you for sharing your amazing talent with us.
Thank you for having me. We'll see you soon.
All right, sounds great, guys. Have a good day. Bye.